Good morning, or good day. After all these lovely presentations from before, I'm going to give you a slight view of what we are doing at the moment in Serbia. I'm going to present the results of our little project in the northeast Serbian site of Iđoš. So we are going to talk about the 3D virtual reconstruction on the basis of structure for motion data in practice. Structure for motion data and 3D scanning have now become a standardized practice in archaeology, not just in the Western world, but also in Southeast Europe and Eastern Europe, and Central Europe. It's everywhere, it's affordable, it's used for a multitude of situations, and we get 3D models. And those 3D models of anything and everything can be specifically, in our case, of particular situations in the field and also the finds that we recover from the field. But these models are just one single step in the process. And if we leave them at that, of just having them as models, we actually do not fulfill their full function, their full possibilities, which is to become reconstructions, to become visualizations that we can offer to the scientific and public environment. So I'm here today to talk more of the right way or all the steps that we can take to make this happen. In getting to the visualization stage, we discuss several factors that should be of key importance. For instance, who is the audience that we are reconstructing this for? What is the scope of our visualizations? And who will be doing it and why? At least in Serbian archaeology, we have this tradition of discussion in the fields while excavating. And that discussion also includes visualizations, but only in our minds at that stage. So we have a colleague working nearby, we ask him, come over here, I need to ask you something. Can you tell me something about this? What do you see here? Can you imagine if this is it having any relationship with this feature, or are they not related? So this is a normal stage in any research, I presume, everywhere in archaeology. And with that added bonus that we now have SFM, which can allow this visualization to occur almost instantly. You don't have to keep it in your mind anymore. You can, if you have access to power and a computer on the field, you can do it in a couple of hours with low poly models and then get the idea, or not, depending on what you have in the field. But the raw models that we get out of our excavations are mostly recognizable and interesting to archaeologists. And as long as we keep them like that, we won't reach a wider audience, which I think is one of the key aspects of our work, being in a public interest. Our data is not very compact. You get models with millions of polygons, depending on the area you're modeling. You also have overly detailed textures very often. And it is in our right, in our profession, to insist on that. And we do. We make enormous amounts of data for the purpose of analysis, presentation, visualization. And still today, most of us have the problem of coping with those models because we have very limited, at most cases, access to adequate hardware or software for that matter. So we sometimes turn to the specialized geodetic companies that obtain large quantities of spatial data from the field, and then we don't have to face that problems of the workflow or the optimization. They know it, they really know it, they do it every day, they're professional at it. But the final product can be a problem. One of the things that we have to face with hiring a professional company not involved with specific archaeological work is the misinterpretation of the data or the inability of the collector to understand what he's collecting. And the problem with that is also highlighted when we have an archaeologist who is not well informed of what the models can do and how to get them. If we have archaeologists who know their stuff, who understand the process and who know the manner of obtaining data, then we're fine. But most of our colleagues, at least in Serbia, still dread the computers. They still think of them as typewriters, glorified at it with nice monitors and everything, but still a typewriter. For instance, this is a detail of the model of our house that we excavated in 2015. And from photo scan, we got two models. Can you guess which one has the higher polycount? I don't see it. I don't see any difference. I know which one has more, but looking at it from many different angles and many different resolutions, you cannot see the difference. And one has 4 million and the other has 400,000 polygons. Now that you know, do you still see any difference? I don't. And that is one of the problems that we need to refer to when we get the data. Do we want to make the 4 million point model, or do we polygon model, or 400,000, or 40,000? Where do we stop? Where is the limit? Where do we stop gathering data just for the fun of it? Things to know and do with the data is that we need to start thinking about the collection and the choosing of data sets. That is important. We can record anything now, but do we need it for the communication with our colleagues or the communication with the general public? Optimization of the models. We need to do some retopology, removal of unnecessary, unreferenced, unused data, unconnected components, similar stuff, in order to get a more streamlined model that could be applicable to many different aspects. Also, we have to consider which software to use. Do we go with proprietary software, which we have to pay heavily for and are limited to, or use the alternative option of free software, which is now growing ever more. Maybe not be as user-friendly as proprietary software, but still, you can learn it, you can master it, and you can even enhance it because it's open. Also, what choice of mediums do we have at our disposal? Do we go for web, where we need smaller models, which are possible to load fast, but at the expense of being less precise or less illustrative? Or do we go for classical DVDs, Blu-rays, where you can fit gigabytes of data, but are hard to be obtained by people, especially people from the outside of a country you're working in, and are less distributable, more prone to damaging, to loss? I think it's a balance of both. We need to be still producing classical media, but still looking toward the internet and the clouds as the next thing, the next solution. And also, when we're dealing with reconstructions and visualizations, we need to make peace with the fact that there will be artistic vision in them. We cannot know, in most cases, the exact nature of the model, but just assume it. This procedure itself has no strict guidelines. There are no textbooks how to do SFM or SFM for dummies. Still, nobody has written it. But when you recording the base layer, which is the 3D information you have in the field, is just one simple process that you do. But however, when you go back to your office or lab, you then reconstruct it, and then every further step you take is actually a matter of discussion, analogies, choosing what your colleagues think, what you can find in the literature. So it's not as precise and it's not as strict as we think. And that is furthermore accentuated when you find structures that have very poor traces, that have very poor evidence of their original appearance, which is in most cases prehistoric archaeology, at least in Serbia. Also, what we can use to enhance our work and make it cheaper and faster is to have materials, models, and textures stored and reused, especially if we are working within one single site. Because just by imagining that the people who lived there in a certain period, in a certain way, had similar or exact resources at their hands, and why should we make 50 daub textures if we can use 5 or 2 or even 1? We don't know their exact look anyway. They were burnt, they were altered by the fire. So we can only assume at it or use analogies from ethnography or local traditions that are still existent. And in that process, we sometimes tend to overstretch ourselves and make dozens of or hundreds of textures of wood, daub, wattle, stone, and everything. And in the end, we can do the job with 1 or 2. It will still be as efficient. And then, in the end, is the original look more important than the discussion and the possibilities of 10 other contested solutions? How do we decide? What do we know? What do we guess? What do we finally present to people? There's always one solution in the end, but is it the right one? We cannot be certain. Now I'm going to move to the site that we are excavating and show you a few examples of what we're dealing with. So Iđoš is found in northeast Serbia. This rectangle red is the area of Banat, and it's in its northeast corner, near the town of Kikinda. It's a Neolithic tell, but also late Bronze Age and early Iron Age settlement. It was excavated several times over the last 100 years that it's known. This is the look of the site. So, do we have a pointer here? I think no. The tip, the tongue at the lower left corner is the Neolithic part of the settlement, and the Bronze Age enclosure is visible to the right upper corner. The enclosure is about 250 meters in diameter, and the Neolithic settlement consists of a tell that is 50 by 70 meters, about 3 meters in height, and the flat settlement, which is about 50 by 100 meters in dimensions. In 2014, we started our project called the Borderlands, with 3 key phases. We are dealing with Europe's first farmers, the early Neolithic phase, which is at the bottom of the tell, the emerging complexity of the middle late Neolithic, which is the Vinča culture, Tisa culture settlement with intermixed material, and the Iron Age centralization, stratification, and migration, which is done by a separate colleague from Dublin, Dr. Bali Malloy. In 2014, we started our assessment of the site, did some geophysics, some coring, did some test trenching, and soon realized that we are going to face several problems, which is the inadequate funding, the limited excavation time we have, limited post-excavation funds to finish what we excavated and process it, that we are going to generate large amount of field documentation in the process, and that we already have faced the low quality of previous research documentation. So we decided to use digital documentation to speed the process, because it's accurate, fast, you don't need field illustrators for most of the situations, can be processed, converted, adapted post-excavation to various other uses. It's cheaper and it's very adaptable. I'll give you 2 examples. One is the structure promotion for documentation, which we've used for our digital documentation of the excavations. So it's the case of an Iron Age pit. You can see the geophysical survey that detected it and the trench around it. Some shots from the excavations. This happy fellow sitting in the hole is actually my colleague Jugoslav here, and we worked together on this presentation. And the final model made from using photoscan of that situation that he's cleaning in the middle picture. So this is the final model of the cleared, emptied pit, and we made it from 40 images taken by one single camera, then converted it into a 3D model of the pit, which is basically a digital elevation model, input it into the GIS software that we use, and we can manipulate it and have it for various needs, so make cross-sections, make technical drawings, scale drawings, different stuff. So this is all done post-excavation. It was not done by an archaeological illustrator sitting in the pit for a couple of hours, wasting his and our time and money. It was all done post-excavation on the same night in the base where we were processing. The other example is the visualization, SFM for visualization. This is a Tisa house that we found in 2015, an orthogonal view with the debris of the walls and finds in situ. The same thing that was cleared out, and then recorded orthogonal and made into a model. Then we started doing the reconstruction. So this is the phase where we're still operating with what we know. We added timber posts, we added the construction of the roof, which is mostly guesswork. We don't have any examples of that in the Neolithic of the Central Europe or Balkans. Then we moved on to the reconstruction phase, where we added different phases of the construction and different views, all still based on the things that we found. It will take a bit. And now we're already moved into the guesswork. Now we're moving into the reconstruction. We've added the false terrain, we've added the false sky, and finally we end up with a reconstruction or 3D model of the house. We cannot be certain whether it had this thatched roof or it was maybe planks, wooden planks, or something else. But also one other key thing is that we know what we know. We know for sure that there was a division wall because we found it. It was 40 centimeters high in situ. We know that these post holes belonged to timber that were holding the construction of the wall and the floor and the roof. But what we know, and the hyphen, is the final look on the right. But also what we need to discuss is we've added this artistic moment of having decorations done over the entries and on the ground level, but we based it on the finds that we had. So we had several cases of dough that was incised, obviously decoratively, and we found it mixed in with the wall debris. Where did it exactly stood? We cannot tell because the walls collapsed each and every way. So it's very difficult to estimate their position in space. But again, we used analogies from different sites and different countries and different colleagues and decided that this is one of the possible solutions. Whether it was exact, we cannot tell. Finally, when we reach all these nice results, we still have to consider the limitations and problems, which is, for one, the hardware requirements. It's ever growing, and you constantly lose that battle. You constantly buy new models of graphic cards, computers, workstations, servers, and you're still losing this game. You cannot beat it. We are not that profitable to be able to keep pace with what's developing all the time. There's also the problem of software. This is examples of the same Iron Age pit from two different GIS programs that support 3D visualization. But look what they do. These models were exported from Photoscan as them, and then overlaid with texture, and in ArcGIS to the right and Global Mapper, they look like this. So there's the question of being compatible between the programs. And in our case, it's still a problem because we cannot adequately visualize it in the official software that we use for documentation. Also, do we need these type of informations really? Because we are generating gigabytes and terabytes and dozens of terabytes of data, but we use very little of it, mostly. Always it is stored and it is said it will be done in the future, but then you move on to a different project, to a different subject, and most of the data stays unused. And gradually it even grows old. There's no more software for it. It's not standard, up to standard, which is now used. So you have a problem of constantly having to rework your data. And finally, how much realism do we want from our reconstructions? You know these two guys. We are all accustomed to their looks as it is. This is what we had in the 90s with the MTV Beavis and Butthead show, but some people made them into a realistic model. Do we want that? Is it good for us? Do we want the houses to look really that realistic or not? It is the question of where do we stop with our reconstructions, because after all, they are reconstructions. I thank you for your attention. If you have any questions.